All right, Alexandra, let's do a video preview of the impeachment trial. And I call it the impeachment trial because I really don't have any other name to call it by, even though the whole thing's an absolute clown show joke. But we're gonna have to call it an impeachment trial. But so we're gonna have a trial. Schumer and McConnell have agreed to the framework of things and how it's going to run. It's going to be about a week long. They said that they'll allow witnesses, but it looks like they're trying to avoid witnesses. What else can you really say about this? Trump is not going to show up. You did a video on this actually. He declined to show up, and that was a smart move. Even Dershowitz also said that was a smart move. You're going to have Leahy preside over this because Roberts has said that this thing doesn't make any sense. It has nothing to do with the Constitution. So you're going to have Leahy, who's going to be the judge of this thing, and he has a number of tweets, literally about a week, maybe 2 weeks ago, where he is calling on Congress to pretty much imprison Trump and all of his supporters. So this is the guy that's going to pass on a fair judgment of this trial. The whole thing is, I hate having to report this story because the whole thing is absolutely, positively a joke. I mean, this is really a joke. And I'll go back to a video real quick, and I'll just go back to a video that we did, not on YouTube. You can find it on Rumble, on BitChute, and on Odyssey, which had to do with that Time magazine article. And I just can't help but think this is all. Why are they doing this? They must know how stupid they look. But this must be distracting from something else. There must be something going on that they need this ridiculous thing to do in order to distract everyone's attention away from what they're really up to, just like they did during the entire year up and until the election. So what do you make of things?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, let's just quickly add that this is a point which we did make on that other video, which you can find on those other platforms, which is it's now absolutely clear that the whole Ukraine, Zelensky, Trump telephone call impeachment, which was always a complete and utter nonsense, was essentially distracting attention away from certain other moves the Democrats were making, which had certain consequences later over the course of 2020. And we now know what those were because we've had a very interesting article appear which provides us with all the details. Go to the video on our other platforms and you'll see what we say. Now, turning to this impeachment, it is not an impeachment, but we have to call it that because there is no other word for it. It is a parody of an impeachment. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States will have nothing to do with it, quite rightly. The so-called judge, it's not quite clear what role he has, by the way, but the presiding officer, if you like, is openly biased against the person who is supposed to be the defendant. There has been no investigation of any kind that has taken place. The House of Representatives voted an article of impeachment, which in the space of a few hours, without listening to witnesses, without taking evidence, without going through committees, without any proper consideration of whether there was a case. And so due process doesn't in fact apply, and this whole thing is completely and utterly unconstitutional. It is a show. It is a show intended to focus us on what is going on in the Senate and in Congress and ignore what is going on elsewhere. But let's just deal with this in itself. The Republicans, and I think it's now universally accepted that nearly all Republicans, there was 45 Republican senators voted against this on Rand Paul's motion on the grounds that it's unconstitutional. It's difficult to see how that's going to change because, to be straightforward about it, and I've discussed this at length in programs on my own channel, this impeachment is unconstitutional. There's not going to be many witnesses called because, of course, there isn't really time to call witnesses. And anyway, one strongly suspects that the Democrats don't want a detailed investigation, because if there was a detailed investigation, that investigation would show that there is in fact no actual case to be made against Donald Trump. The incitement case that many people have been talking about is unsustainable on its face, because the things Trump said on the 6th of January do not constitute incitement. At least that's my opinion, but it's also the opinion of many lawyers, including lawyers like Andrew McCarthy, who are hostile to Donald Trump. And those words that he used, which were about peacefully protesting, are anyway protected under the First Amendment. There's been this attempt to argue that there was some kind of dereliction of duty by Donald Trump because he didn't send the troops and the police in to clear away the protesters when he should have done. But again, we don't really know that that's the case because, again, as I discussed in another program, there hasn't been a proper investigation to establish whether that is really so and to what extent other people, like the mayor of Washington, D.C., the chiefs of police, the people in charge of security on Capitol Hill, the National Guard Command in the Pentagon, to what kind of role those people had. So we have an unconstitutional impeachment taking place without the presiding officer designated by the Constitution, ignoring rules of due process against a private individual, because Donald Trump is now a private individual. He holds no office in the United States. This is a piece of ludicrous theatre, and it is a tragedy and a comedy at one and the same time for the United States that it is happening. The rest of the world, apart from other, liberal voices in Europe, looks upon this and shakes its head.
So, that's the point that I think we need to focus in on. There's been a lot of evidence, and we've done a lot of videos breaking down how the whole incitement thing doesn't hold water. There's evidence of the timeline. There's evidence of the information that the mayor had a week in advance. There's a lot of information that it's not as crystal clear as the mainstream media and the Democrats make it out to be. And I'm being very kind to the Democrats and the mainstream media when I say this. I'm actually self-censoring myself in a way. But it's obvious that what happened on January 6th is not as they want the narrative to be. That I think we all know, and we all know the game that's being played. But I'm trying to think to myself, and I think it's something we could discuss. Why are they doing this? The world is laughing. They're destroying their own country. They've got 30,000 troops there. They've erected barricades. They're going to now go for a week and they're going to do this show trial. The mainstream media is going to pump it up. Big tech is going to amplify everything. Of course, they're all going to work in unison. As we now know, they all do work in unison. We know that now from the Time article. So they're all going to work together. They're going to amplify this up. They've already been successful to a very large degree in getting the word insurrectionist into the public debate. They've been successful in getting the word coup, American coup, into the public debate. They've been very successful in getting the word domestic terrorist into the public sphere. But I'm trying to think to myself, it doesn't make. Why do you want to destroy your own country? What do the Democrats, big tech, the mainstream media? What do they want to do with this? And I just can't accept the fact that it's just all about they don't want Trump to run. Again, I can see that that's one benefit, but what are they distracting us from? What are they up to? We know that Biden's building up troops in Syria. We're going to do a video on Iran. Russia is once again the boogeyman. You have lockdowns. You have the economy imploding. Bitcoin is going through the roof. They're printing dollars. I'm just trying. I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you, and I don't know if you'll have the answer. You're obviously super smart, but. And we may not be able to find the answer, but I want to, maybe people in the comments can chime in. But there's no doubt that they know this is dumb, but they're doing it, and they know what they're doing. The Democrats may be crazy and dumb to a certain degree, but we've seen once again from that Time article that they're extremely cunning and devious, and they're excellent actors. They'll put on their acting game face, and they'll extend that, like the Ukraine gate thing, for months at a time if it means that it's going to help them accomplish a different goal. I mean, they're ideologically driven. Anyway, I said a lot, and that'll be, it's up to you now to kind of put, if you can, put stuff in place.
Well, I have to say that obviously there's lots of things going on, and we've had a fairly hyperactive period with the new administration coming in, and it's making all sorts of moves, not always very coherent moves internationally, and it's also making lots of moves within the US itself. But I think the primary purpose of this impeachment is to delegitimize not Donald Trump himself, but the entire movement, or rather the entire force of people who he embodies, those 74 or 75 million people who voted for him, to somehow say to those people that you cannot go on supporting this person because he's this terrible person, and that if you go on supporting him, you are terrible people and you represent a threat to the Republic, to the United States, and that justifies all the methods and mechanisms and structures of control that we are taking. So it's intended to create, to foster this narrative of some sort of great existential threat which justifies all these extraordinary measures that we've been seeing, all these attempts to control social media, to control what goes on in social media, all these troop deployments, all these investigations of loyalty of those troops, which are now underway. We see reports, by the way, of further investigations in Georgia now, and they're apparently being sponsored by Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, who's apparently a Republican. I mean, he still says he's a Republican, but we see investigations all over the place. And I suspect that's part of this. It's an attempt to construct a narrative that there is some kind of great challenge or threat in the United States which needs extraordinary measures to suppress. And I strongly suspect also that this is partly an attempt to divide the Republican Party and to peel off from the core of the Republican Party its more establishment figures, people like McConnell himself and Liz Cheney and the others, so as to sort of marginalize the core of the Republican Party and at the same time focus all this hostility against this. My overwhelming impression of the Democrats is that I'm not talking about, obviously, the vast majority of people who vote Democrat, who are registered Democrats, but I'm talking about the core leadership, is that their major concern is power and control within the United States itself. They've now got their hands on it and they don't really want to let go. And they're using this impeachment as one of many devices to try to consolidate that control and to perpetuate it through 2022, through 2024, and beyond that.
Yeah, but to what means? I mean, I understand what you're saying, that they want to create that narrative where they demonize and they marginalize the 75, 80 million people that support Trump. But where are they moving to? What's their end goal there? I mean, how do you? I'm just trying to rationalize it. Okay, so you demonize 80 million people. What's your end goal? Just power, control, but power for what? Where do they want to move the United States towards? They want to just rewind the clock and go back towards Obama-Clinton days, or are they really taking the U.S. towards some authoritarian construct, some neoliberal utopia? I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out, how do you destroy half of your country, or the people, half of your people, for the good of the country, or at least in your mind, you think it's for the good of the country? Why? What's the logic there?
That is an actually excellent question, and I'm going to make a guess, which is that if you put if you have Pelosi and you really ask her these questions, you find that she herself will have trouble explaining why she wants to have power this much. Obviously, there is always the attraction of power itself, which should not be underestimated. People always like to be in control or to be in positions which they imagine give them control. But of course, when you actually look at the Democratic agenda, the Democratic Party's agenda, two things at least stand out for me. On the one hand, it is massively ambitious. I mean, we see a huge spending program underway. We see massive attempts to, cut back on the, fossil fuel industries. We see the Keystone pipeline being closed down. We see moves against fracking. We see major efforts to pursue the climate change agenda, to pursue it, in a very, very ambitious way. We see also a very, very strong policies with immigration, with identity issues, with all that sort of thing. We see moves to protect the financial services industry, Wall Street and all that. We see attempts to strengthen, the tech companies. But even though you can see the sort of general direction in which they want to go, when you actually look at these programs individually, they don't really have very much coherence to them. It's like a group of people who are in a huge hurry to get things done very fast without really thinking those things through in any very coherent way. It's like they have policy run, if you like, by newspaper article. They have people like Krugman, who comes up with all kinds of economic ideas. They have all the sort of climate people who have all their ideas. They have identity people who have their programs, immigration people who have their programs. So you want to try and put this all together, rush through a program very fast, which you haven't really worked out. You haven't worked out the details. You don't really know how it's going to work. But at the same time, you know that much of this is very unpopular with many people up and down the United States. Many people in the United States may agree with individual parts of this program, but the number who agree with all of it is much less. And with some parts of it, you will find lots of people who strongly disagree with it. But because you're very ideological, extremely ideological, you can't compromise on any part of it. So, of course, that means that you have to clamp down. You have to insist that these people are absolutely, deplorable, that they're dangerous, that they are threats to the republic, that they're threats to public order. And so you have to find all these techniques of control to basically close them down. At the same time, or rather you worry, that the people who on the ground are there to carry out all this repression for you, all these suppression devices, the people in the military, the people in the police, who, remember, you were wanting to defund not so very long ago, you worry that they're not fully reliable either. So it's a bizarre rag bag of things. People, I know, make many comparisons with the Bolsheviks and the Democrats. But the Bolsheviks knew what they were about. These people don't really, it seems to me, ultimately know what they're about. They have some vague idea about some kind of utopian vision for the United States that they're intent on pursuing, but they don't really understand it themselves, and they don't understand how it works, and they're rushing forward frantically in order to implement it, while silencing and closing down everybody who disagrees with them. In some ways, that makes it even more dangerous, in my opinion, than it would if this thing was properly thought through. Because what you will end up is with the worst of all worlds, where it all comes crashing down, but all sorts of control mechanisms have in the meantime been put in its place. Anyway, that's a long answer to your question, but I think it perhaps helps to understand where this very strange, actually bizarre, parodic impeachment fits into this.
Yeah, but I'm going to go back again to my initial question. To what ends? What is their vision for these people? What is their vision for the United States in 2000,
Yeah.
2030? Is it
Yes.
a neo-Bolshevik? And I've used that term in the past, and I've actually seen Fox News take that term. So Fox News needs to pay the Duran a royalty fee. But is this new neo-Bolshevik something akin to like what you said with the Bolshevik Revolution, where the Bolsheviks said you're all going to go to one store to buy bread, and then you're all going to go to a different shop to buy toilet paper. Then you're all going to go to a different shop to buy oranges. Is the new model, you're all going to order from one company, Amazon.
Yeah.
You're all going to listen to two channels, MSNBC and CNN.
Yes.
You're all going to use, two social networks, Twitter and Facebook. I mean, is this what they're trying to do when you mean authoritarian? You mean control the population? If you don't agree with this, unlike the Bolsheviks, we're not going to send you to Siberia, right? We're not going to send you to a gulag. What we're going to do is we're going to send you to an internet gulag, where you're just not going to be able to bank. You're not going to be able to get insurance. You're not going to be able to use social media. You're not going to be able to use PayPal. None of that. So you're going to be exiled, on the internet. I mean, is this their idea somehow of how they're going to move towards this neo-Bolshevik model? I'm just trying to figure out, how do they see the world in 5 to 10 years, these guys?
You see that there are some people within the Democratic Party who undoubtedly do think in those terms. They do buy into that kind of model. They want, one company running, retail, if you like, through the internet. They want that kind of centralization and control. But that's one part of the coalition. Other parts of the coalition want something completely different. They're more focused on identity issues. Other parts still, like the financial people in Wall Street, they have completely different ideas, because they want the financialization of the economy, but they also want some degree of diversity, because you need some kind of diversity if you're a hedge fund, so that you can work against some companies and lift up some and bring down others. That's why I say this thing doesn't ultimately have a great deal of coherence to it, which, by the way, as I said, makes it more dangerous. You can see how it can all collapse like a house of cards, at the same time as it's extremely repressive. I would be very concerned about, where the US is going, even if I was a Democrat, because the driver who's driving the car is driving to a great extent blindfold. They're driving on instinct, but they're not actually looking forward along the road in any very clear way. And yes, there is definitely a neo-Bolshevik element to this, and some of these elements of control, the turning of people into unpersons, the cancelling of people for opinions which, to be very clear, are perfectly legal opinions. People are entitled to their opinions. They're not breaking the law by expounding on them, by stating them, but still that makes them completely, unacceptable people, and so they have to be cancelled. There's been an actually very interesting series of articles by Glenn Greenwald and Matt Taibbi, in which they point out how there's a whole collection of people now in parts of the media, the New York Times, CNN, and the rest, who spend all their time going through, in social media sites, looking for people who say things which somehow mean that they should be cancelled, and, who then orchestrate, if you like, campaigns against these people to sort of close them down and to have them driven off social media. There's an awful lot of that going on, and that is really very alarming. But is it ever going to be enough to control the whole of the United States? I don't think so. Is this project that they have ultimately going to succeed in transforming the United States, especially when they don't really understand what their own project is? Are they really going to be able to carry it through with people like Biden and Harris, who, well, in one case, one wonders whether he knows his own mind and is even really signed up to this. And in the other case, one wonders whether she has the force of personality and the competence to see it through. Are they really going to be able to do all of this? But the point is, they're going to do a huge amount of damage along the way. The Bolsheviks had a plan. I'm not sure these people do.
Okay, so yeah, we'll leave it there. The impeachment is a circus, but there's definitely something bigger at play.
It's a
They're
circus.
trying to put something bigger
Oh, yeah.
in play.
It's a circus run by clowns. And this is a story of a revolution, because this is an attempted revolution, also run by clowns. I mean, what was it, Marx said, that history repeats itself. The first time is tragedy and the second time is farce. This has a farcical quality, though that doesn't make it not dangerous. It is very dangerous indeed.
Very dangerous. All right, guys, go to the Duran shop, pick up some merch, maybe get a cool long sleeve. I have the flag of Spain actually on my shirt. And look for Alexander's channel, look for my channel, look for all of us on all the alternative platforms. I have a link for all those platforms down below.
Indeed, and I have got the flag of Scotland on my sweatshirt, and the flag of the UK on my mug, and the flag of England on my hat. So I'm being, very British today. I've got all the various parts of the United Kingdom there.
Got Mexico.
And Mexico, there we go, gosh. And you'll find great things in our shop, and you'll find us all on our other platforms, which Alex mentioned. And please support us also through Patreon, Subscribestar, and PayPal, and Bitcoin, and all the rest. And we look forward to you joining us on our next program.
All right, take care, everybody.